This time on the Goblin Grenade Podcast here on Max Heroes and Villains YouTube channel, I'm talking about Chronicles, and more specifically, why this set led to the reserve list existing. But first, the intro. My name is Dom Douglas, and I've been playing Magic the Gathering for what seems like forever, but in fact, it's only been on and off for about 30 years. With that comes an expectation that I'm the best player ever. You couldn't be any more wrong in that statement. What I do like, however, is having a lot of fun. Whether it be playing Limited, Draft, Commander, Standard when I get the chance, Arena, Magic the Gathering Online, it doesn't matter as long as a good time is had. And with that, I have some opinions, not just of Magic the Gathering, but also video games, comics, maybe even a TV show or two. This is the Goblin Grenade Podcast. So today, I have a script. It's scripted just about the same way, but I think better than the Friday the 13th lawsuit video was. Thank you for watching that as well. This time, however, we're going into what is one of the most contentious decisions Wizards of the Coast has ever made from both sides, that pertaining to the creation of the reserve list. We will get into what the reserve list is. Don't you worry about it. It's just about 572 cards. It can never be reprinted again. Ever. Even. Yeah. And the set that kind of was the catalyst for the creation of this list, Magic the Gathering Chronicles. Well, what is Chronicles, you may ask? Well, it was the first reprint set in Magic's history, and the aftermath of said release made sure that it took Wizards a couple decades almost to come out with another reprint set. Exclusive reprint set. No new cards were in Chronicles. Don't forget to like and subscribe here at Max Heroes and Villains for the Goblin Grenade Podcast. This is a weekly show that I try to get up every week on Wednesdays. Sometimes I'm not good at it, but sometimes I hit it consistently. I don't know what to say, but when it comes to the Chronicles and the creation of a reserve list, leave a like, leave a comment, leave a dislike even, because I know some of you are not going to like my opinions on this. Engagement is great and fun, but keep it civil, folks, okay? Keep it civil. I know some of you out there might not like what I'm about to say on this particular podcast about the reserve list, but keep it civil, folks. But before we talk about this, we have to discuss Wizards of the Coast's very first attempt at meeting supply, the growing supply for this game. Fallen Empires was released in November of 1994. This was Magic the Gathering's 5th expansion set. So at this moment in time, the only sets to exist in the history of Magic the Gathering was the following: Alpha, Beta, Unlimited, and Revised, which were the base sets, and the expansion sets of Arabian Nights, Antiquities, Legends, and the Dark. These sets were all getting extremely hard to come by. Stores would order 10 boxes of Magic the Gathering product and only receive one if they were lucky. So the demand was there, but the supply wasn't. And Wizards of the Coast printed the ever-loving crap out of this set. Stores would order 1 box of product and receive 10 instead. The market was quickly flooded with this set. And what did you get in a pack of Fallen Empire, you may ask? 8 cards. Yeah, Wizards of the Coast, as in the years since, has attempted this type of product with Assassin's Creed and March of the Machine's Aftermath, just to name a few. Those two sets were not the first go-around of printing an 8-card per pack set, and we know how poorly those sets were received. So 6 of these cards were uncommon and 2 uncommons. This set had no rares, folks. Imagine that. Imagine if Wizards of the Coast today released a set that didn't have a single rare in the entire set. That was Fallen Empires. They also printed around 340 million cards of Fallen Empire. So the math's like this, okay? 4.25 million packs of Fallen Empire existed. 60 packs per box because, once again, 8 cards per pack. You could put more packs in the box, meaning almost 71,000 boxes existed. And with how bad this set sold, they were able to be brought pretty cheaply. Side note, this is one of my favorite sets to open when it came out because you could get packs for $1. Okay, one singular dollar got me a pack of Magic the Gathering. Sure, it was only 8 cards, but it had the best discard spell ever printed at the time in him, the Torok. A functional reprint in White Knight in Order of the Light Beer. Yes, it's pronounced light beer. This is back when Wizards of the Coast had a sense of humor, along with the functional reprint of Black Knight in Order of the Ebon Hand. It contained the first printing of the namesake of this podcast, Goblin Grenade. Another note of a particular run of Fallen Empires is misprinted with a different card back from a game called Wyvern. This was a massive mistake from the production factory, as they were printing both TCGs at the time, and these cards today command extremely high prices. The normal printing of Orcish Spy from Fallen Empire goes for around 5 cents. The Wyvern-backed ones go for around $350 at the time of this podcast. Side story, the mini store at the Acme. This is how wild and weird the town that I grew up in was. We didn't really have an easy access card store. Yeah, we had a few, but we'd have to drive 20 miles, 20 minutes out the way. And we're in high school and almost none of us drove, especially when we first started playing the game. So what happened was there was this, we had this weird strip mall with an Acme food store, a Radio Shack, and a couple other stores around it, in it. But instead of walking outdoors, they built an indoor enclosure so you could walk in, and made it this weird strip mall type thing. Well, somebody rented a space in that particular indoor enclosure where you have access to all the stores. And they would put up their knickknacks, their little themed things there. It was basically like a catalog type store, stuff that you would order from Sears or Spencer's in the day, but it was for grandmas and stuff like that. I'm talking the bric-a-brac and the precious moments type stuff. Well, one day he accidentally got a box of Magic the Gathering in, and he almost sent it back. And instead, he was like, well, let me open it up and see it. I got it on accident. By the time he opened it up and we realized that he had Magic the Gathering in the store, that box was gone within the day. And he was like, oh, word? This man, to his infinite credit, saw another avenue of revenue. So, and this is way back before you had to go through Diamond and anything like that. He was ordering from whoever he was ordering these knickknacks from, Magic the Gathering product. And he would get not a lot in, but he would get enough that it would satiate the high school, which, I kid you not, was a 10-minute walk away from this particular supermarket indoor strip mall area. So sometimes after school, we would walk there, buy some Magic cards, buy some Magic packs, crack them open, trade them with whatever, walk back to the school after hours, because it was the drama department, okay? The drama kids who played Magic the Gathering, go figure. And before rehearsals would start, we would just start playing Magic and seeing what we improved and whatnot. This man, for a very long time, kept Magic the Gathering product in the store. Until eventually he closed it and when he retired. So yeah, that's the crazy side story, and that's how we were able to get Magic the Gathering products in my podunk town in South Jersey because of a simple accident a distributor made. And a person who was renting a little kiosk area took advantage of that mistake. To his credit, to our credit, to everyone's credit. The reason why Magic the Gathering existed in that part of town was because of this man. And now, back to the Chronicles story. And from this moment forward, Wizards of the Coast would be very careful with how much of a cent they printed. At this time, they were still trying to figure out how much to print without bankrupting the company and make sure that everybody would buy the product. Because this product in Fallen Empire collected dust in a warehouse for about 4 years, okay? A warehouse that required payment for storage, that dang near colossal failure that was Fallen Empire, along with the damage done to LGSs because of how cheap they had to sell these packs to even get them off the shelves. Remember, This set was available for about 4 years after launch, and they stopped printing this about 3 months after it came out, if not way before that. The fact that this product sat and there was only a handful of people buying this set kind of tells you something. And don't forget, the LGSs as well had to kind of store it and sell it at a loss. This was a very dismal time in Magic the Gathering because the company's only a year and a half old at this point. The game's only been out for maybe 2 years, if that. And already you've had your first set, which was a cataclysmic failure. So now that we've set up what happened just a year prior, we can now get to the story of Chronicles itself. I always felt Chronicles was great because we got needed reprints, although the more powerful and sought after at the time cards were absent in the name of the reprint. So no OG Dual Lands, no Power 9, but at the time some played and sought after reprints got reprinted in Chronicles. The end goal was to supply players with these cards, as the first few sets released in the beginning of the lifetime, as I've already said, had very low print runs. Take example for this, okay? There is only 22 to 23,000 legally to be played Black Lotuses that exist. No proxies, no other alternate prints, no 30th anniversary editions, no tournament editions, okay? The breakdown is like this. 1,100 for the Alpha, which was the first set ever printed in Magic's history. 3,300 for Beta, okay? And 18,000 for Unlimited. That's how we get to the estimated goal around 22 to 23,000 Black Lotuses existing. And remember, back in the day, card sleeves didn't exist for a hot minute, okay? I don't think they came out till a few years after the game. So there's been stories of people saying, yeah, I play Black Lotuses on the concrete in school. Yes, that happened. And this set is one of the few reasons why the reserve list was created, and a change in set design and reprint policies. These cards were white bordered, and if I'm not mistaken, not standard legal at the time. Once again, we go into the Wayback Machine. This is when Magic only had 3 60-card formats officially: Type 1, Type 1.5, and Type 2. Type 1 was all sets were legal with some bans and restrictions. Today's equivalent would be Vintage or Legacy. Type 1.5 had more restrictions and ban cards. It would be the today's version of Modern. I played Type 1.5 during my high school years and early adult life. Type 2 was only the last 2 years of sets to be released, or the past few sets that would rotate out. Today, this would be called Standard, and Draft was always a thing in the game, but not. It was only just beginning, and it was only starting to get better from here on out. Remember, the first couple of sets, Alpha, Beta, you could open a pack that had 3 basic lands in there. And when it came to Chronicles, this set was only printed in America and Japan, but for some other reason, versions of this style of set exists. What I mean by style is kind of different names. I think Renaissance was a Germany, French, Italian release, on top of, I think, Japan getting black borders for most of these cards. We'll get into that in a little bit as well. So once again, this is another heavily researched podcast done, and hopefully more coherent than the lawsuit one from Friday the 13th, which I felt like I had red threads. I was like that meme from It's Always Sunny with the red threads and the conspiracy theory thing on the wall. That's how I felt about that one. So I'm going to cite my sources right now. mtg.fandom.com, tcgplayer.com, mtggoldfish.com, magic.wizards.com. Those are the 4 main sources that I used, actually the 4 only sources that I used for articles and whatnot to talk about Chronicles, because once again, this is back before Magic became a cultural phenomenon, before it was on ESPN2 with the World Championships, before commercials were even made. So when it comes to these type of sets, there's very little information about them that I can't even pull YouTube videos on for commercials of this, because they weren't simply being made. Now, Chronicles was released in the year of our Lord 1995. Magic the Gathering's 12th set reprinted cards from Arabian Nights, Antiquities, Legends, and the Dark. As the explosion of Magic the Gathering was in full effect, the low print runs of these sets, Wizards of the Coast thought that they should do a reprint set so newer players could get the cards. A very honorable thing. The reprint numbers are as follows. Only 14 cards from Arabian Nights, 21 cards from Antiquities, the mass bulk of the set coming from Legends at a whopping 71 reprints from Legends, and 19 cards from the Dark. They were reusing the same art and expansion symbols that they would be white bordered because at the time, Alpha, Beta, and the first few Alpha and Beta were black bordered, and in an attempt at keeping the value of the original printings as they were, as to try not to anger the existing player base that had played the game from the start or the early days. Hence, the concession was made. The white border cards would be printed. This set would be printed and white bordered to keep the expansion black border cards at the same value. Spoiler, this did not work. The breakdown was as follows on rarity: 40 commons, 30 uncommons, and 46 rares. Mythic rarity had not been created yet. That would happen once Shards of Alara was released in 2008, and that would be Magic the Gathering's 47th expansion. This is like the 6th or 7th. And this is a reprint set. A possible fun fact, if true, this set was meant, also Chronicles was meant to be printed as long as demand was still happening, and to also rotate the cards out to continue getting players easier access to the cards all the time, as the game would change over the course of years. This wouldn't be attempted again until Foundations releases decades later. And that's the idea of Foundations. Foundations was recently printed. It's a 5-year, always standard legal set. All the cards in there will be reprinted for the next couple of years, and then eventually they will rotate it out with Foundations 2 with more of the same, but also rotating out some of the cards and adding some new cards back in. Released in August 1995 and available until December 1996 when the print run was exhausted, and the way to integrate reprints was to print them in main sets instead. Yes, they quickly made a concession that we would reprint in core main sets, your 6th edition, 7th edition, 5th edition, Magic 2011 core set 2015, and an all reprint set wouldn't happen again until 2013 with the release of the first Modern Masters set, and that utilized reprints from 8th edition to Alara Reborn, so Wizards of the Coast could get more modern format cards into the modern ecosystem. They could get, and considering that there would be 10 master sets released since 2013 and 4 remaster sets released with the plethora of secret lairs, I'd say Wizards of the Coast has figured out how to reprint almost every card in this game's existence, except for those on the reserve list. One of the problems of the set, it was massively overprinted to an estimated tune of 180 million Chronicles cards were produced individually, because Wizards of the Coast thought this set was going to sell and continue to sell forever, and they also didn't learn the lesson that Fallen Empires had just taught them a year prior. With 12 cards per pack, the math's like this: 15 million packs with 45 booster packs per box, with over 330,000 boxes existing. This, coupled with 4th edition releasing earlier in the year, that also was a reprint set, 500 million cards from this set would be produced in 4th edition. And the math for 4th edition, math's like this: 33 million packs with almost 1 million boxes produced. And this reprinted cards also from Arabian Nights, Antiquities, Legends, and the Dark, while removing 51 cards from the revised edition. And people were getting mad that their prized cards were quickly becoming bulk at this point. 4th edition apparently sold like gangbusters from the jump, and Wizards of the Coast has never really officially released sales numbers, but I remember buying as much 4th edition as I could on a high school freshman's bankroll. Nowadays, 4th edition isn't that hard to collect for. Only 4 cards from this set sell for over $10 in today's market, that being Manavolt, Sylvan Library, Land Tax, and Strip Mine. Wizards had already made the decision not to reprint the OG dual lands, the Power 9, and some of the more powerful cards that were existing in Alpha, Beta, and also Unlimited. with 4th edition. How the world would be a different place if that were to have happened on a consistent basis. Every core set just gas it up. But because a bunch of crybabies got mad that they just shelled out money for City of Brass only for it to be reprinted in this Chronicles set, and if Chronicles was to be reprinted all the time, their investment would be worthless. Yeah, investment bros have existed since the beginning of this game's existence. I'm sorry to tell y'all. It ain't a new thing. It's just a new thing with buying packs and, collector's editions. Moving forward, just know that my opinion on this truly stupid debacle is that neckbeards got mad and caused cards to never be accessible to most players ever again. And sadly, Wizards had to relent on this pressure. The game was only about 2 years old at this time, and now a big majority of the player base was about to get up and never shuffle up and play ever again because of Chronicles. So to calm the masses, Wizards of the Coast decided to make a rather impulsive decision to announce publicly that the following cards would never be reprinted. Any card from Alpha and Beta that hadn't already been reprinted, any uncommons or rares from Arabian Nights or Antiquities that hadn't already been reprinted, any rares from Legends or the Dark that hadn't already been reprinted, and 75% of all rares from all future sets. The other 25% would be eligible for reprinting. And this also prevents Wizards from not just reprints, but also not being able to reprint functionally identical cards. They couldn't just rename Volcanic Island, which when tapped adds either a red or a blue mana to your mana pool, something like Magma Beach, which would do the same thing. Or in the strange case, as the TCG Player article shows, brings up a rather harmless card in Thunder Spirit. This is a 2/2 with flying and first strike for 1 generic mana and 2 white mana. This card today, if it was reprinted, would be Draft Chaff, meaning only really viable in a sealed or draft environment. But because of the reserved list ruling, this card, or any other card with these stat lines, keywords, and mana cost, can never be reprinted again. One caveat to this was when Wizards of the Coast printed the collector's editions, which was a complete set of Magic's Beta edition, one of each card, and 61 basic lands. These were black bordered and had a different back to them as well. And when Wizards of the Coast used to print the World Championship decks, these were produced from 1997 to 2004. Every year, these reprints of winning decks of the World Championship Tournament and some of the finalist decks totaling 4 for each year. Now, if multiple decks were the same in the top 8, they would choose the highest ranked player using a different deck and go down the list until they had 4 unique decks to sell. These were gotten around the list as well by having a different back, plus having the signature of the pilot on the deck of the front of the card, as well once again being gold bordered. Side story: my actual World Championship decks. Let me know if you like when I divert a little bit from the story and kick it on over to something. These 3 boxes right here, these just a Dragon Shield, a Dovin, and another Dragon Shield. These contain, sleeved up I might add, which I contemplating unsleeving because I already took some of the more better cards out, but I'll unsleeve one right now. This is a Wall of Blossoms. This is what I'm talking about. Let's focus in here. Focus. Wall can attack. When Wall of Blossom enters, draw a card. 0-4 wall. But you see gold border, but you also see the back. World Championship tells you when it was, and this was from 1998. And I'll see if it has the actual... I don't know if that's the token. That's definitely not the token, but this is one of the rarest tokens that I own, I think. This one didn't have it. This one doesn't have it. And I took most of the cards out. I mean, yeah, it does have the... This was the recurring Nightmare deck and Survival of the Fittest deck. Some of these cards, some of these World Championship cards, have some value to them. Not a lot, not a crazy amount of value as opposed to their regular edition. But Commander players, yeah. I took all the Birds of Paradise out of this one, I think, and I took out a couple other cards from this. This one was... I don't think this is the Seattle one. I don't think I bought two of the Seattles. No. We'll see this like right here. Voltaic Key for one and tap it, untap target artifact. You can see the signature right there. I think this is John Finkel's deck, maybe. No, I don't think it is. But that's the back for that year's, because the backs would change. And this was Brussels 2000. But the sleeves are terrible. The sleeves are from 8 years ago. A product for a video that never saw the light of day on a former channel that I used to be part of. But yeah, yeah. Yeah, like collect all 4 World Championship decks, relive the excitement of the 2000 World Champions. Yeah, that was the Finkel's deck. You know. And it would tell you, like, you know, John Finkel's explosive mono blue deck used artifacts such as Grim Monolith, Metal Worker, and Voltaic Key to generate huge amounts of mana. The mana in turn put large creatures into play to finish off stunned opponents. So that's what that deck wants to do. And this is the last one that I own. This is, mind you, these are the only 3 of the original products of my original Magic the Gathering set that I own. But, you know, we have like Ball Lightning, gold border with the signature, unaffected by summoning sickness, bury, and once again, this is a Seattle deck. So apparently I bought 2 Seattle decks. I used to buy them all the time, and I think I got rid of the vast majority, but for some reason, these 3 were the ones that I kept. And this was Ben Rubin's deck. Yeah, this was Ben Rubin's deck, and this one has Wastelands in it. So if I ever need a Wastelands for Commander decks, because most of the time Commander decks will be, your Commander play group will be okay with these. And when it comes to proxies or the championship decks or the world, if anybody wants to use them, I'm all for it. I'm all for proxies as well. Just let us know beforehand if you're playing a super powerful tier 4++, which is the stupidest shit I ever heard. I'm okay with proxies. I always have been. So yeah, that's side story number 2. And, you know, we'll go back to the podcast real quick. We'll go back to the meat and potatoes of the podcast real quick. But if you like what you see, don't forget to like and subscribe and leave a comment. For Max Heroes and Villains, I am Dom Douglas from the Goblin Grenade Podcast. And now, back to the Chronicles story. I used to buy a few of these every year back in the day. And this is how we used to, you know, kind of playtest some 60 card formats like 1.5 for our deck to see how it would fare against the best decks created. And I still have 3 of these decks from that time period as some of the only Magic the Gathering items I held on to before getting rid of my collection. And don't cry for me, I didn't have any Power 9 or OG dual lands, but I definitely owned some decent cards like Lake of the Dead, Force of the Will, and quite a few Mana Vaults. We would play using these decks that had a placeholder card that would tell you a brief description of what this deck wanted to do and how to somewhat play it. So this is how we play tested each other against some of the best decks to see if our decks held up. Remember, Magic was really lawless at this time, and I'm going to go on a side tangent here about it as I scroll up to the next paragraph that I will eventually say. Magic the Gathering in the early days. I'm from New Jersey originally, okay? The tri-state area was one of the hotbeds of Magic the Gathering, seemingly out of nowhere, I might add. We had a lot of players. John Finkel, Hall of Famer, is from the tri-state area. I think New York, New Jersey-ish area, to be precise. And it was a hotbed, and it was brutal. Like, we didn't play for packs, you know? Like, the stores weren't giving away, like, 10 packs for the winner of the tournament. It was a winner-take-all cash buy-in, okay? It was $5 a head. And you basically won until one of you was left. And that one person took home all the money. So rampant cheating was also involved. And everybody was just about doing it. But my stupid, naive butt in 1996, whatnot, wasn't fully aware that, yes, somebody would cheat because money was on the line, I would still get top 4 in most tournaments. Now, that's not really saying nothing when the field was like 12 players just all playing the same thing. I was playing something so far off the meta that nobody could prepare for it. But the thing was, top 4, top 3, top second place got you nothing. It was only the winner of the whole thing got all the cash. So I never won anything, but I was consistently in the top 4 because I was so off meta with the rest of everybody else. I was playing a blue-black discard deck that was using a buyback spell as its kill spell and Necropotence. No, not Necropotence. Pestilence. Yeah. I was playing Pestilence, okay? We'll show those cards too. This was my combo right here. This was my win con besides getting rid of your hand and counterspelling everything you did. Yes, I was that degenerate back in the day. When Wizards announced the creation of the reserve list publicly, it was done for transparency's sake. Wizards wanted to tell the player base which cards from future sets would not be reprinted so the neckbeards could buy and collect without getting burned again. I get the feeling these people who complained and whined would lose their minds with the state of the game today. Between Secret Lairs releasing on damn near a daily basis, 7 sets coming out in 2016, and the 18 versions of cards that get released in each set, and the ever-increasing prices for getting less product, man, these people chose the wrong hill to die on. Getting back on track, when the reserve list was announced, most of the player base was happy. At the time, the most expensive cards were like $30 to $50. And those were the Power 9 usually. Yes, decades ago, Black Lotuses were going for $50. Nowadays, you can't even get one for less than $8,500, and that's the unlimited version, the third ever Magic set next to Alpha and Beta, and that's damaged, folks. A card that looked like it was used on bicycle spokes. $8,500 is the least amount of money you can spend on it. Near mint ones that are not graded go for $28,000. The one Post Malone bought for $800,000, that's an artist proof version of the card, and is signed by the legendary artist Christopher Rush, who sadly passed away in 2016. Only 50 artist proofs of this card are existing, and technically is not legal to play as it has a blank back instead of the Magic the Gathering backing. Both sides of this argument were correct at the time. Chronicles was so overprinted that today, only 4 out of the 125 cards in this set are worth more than $2. Those being City of Brass, Concordant Crossroads, Ashnod's Altar, and Blood Moon. Even the 5 Elder Dragons, the original inspiration for a little format called Elder Dragon Highlander, more commonly known today as Commander, the most successful format in history of Magic the Gathering, the most popular format, the most played format. Yeah, the original 5 from this set, almost all of them go for around $1 for each of them, except for Nicol Bolas. For some reason, he goes for about $2.50. By the way, Nicol Bolas is the 5th most expensive card in Chronicles. $2.50. So in that aspect, the player base was correct, but hindsight being 2020, maybe not. Mark Rosewater later, years down the line, in an article wrote in 2013, that the release of Chronicles almost killed the game. So to save it, the creation of the reserve list was implemented and has been maintained over the years, that this reserve list will always be honored, for reasons that we'll get to in a little bit. Then in 1999, Wizards of the Coast announced cards from Mercadian Masks, released in October of that year, and later would not be added to the reserve list, as a way to stop the self-inflicted madness that had become the reserve list, still keeping the existing reserve list intact while preventing any more cards from being put on there. The player base once again was pleased with this decision. It kept the collectors happy, the high-end collectors while also making it easier for players to get reprints of anything past Mercadian Masks. Then in 2002, Wizards of the Coast followed up with the following changes to the reserve list. Commons and uncommons from Alpha and Beta were removed from the list. This is why Dynamic Tutor, the best tutor of all of Magic, is able to be reprinted, because it was printed as an uncommon in alpha and beta. Think about it. The best tutor in the history of the game was originally printed as an uncommon. OG Magic was truly the wild, wild west. I should know. I've been playing since 4th edition. Was wild and crazy and damn near lawless. On top of the cheating, just the overpowering cards that existed at that time, along with anti, but this is not an anti-discussion in any way, shape, or form. Rares from Ice Age were also added to the reserve list. Apparently, they were supposed to be on there from the start, but I think Wizards of the Coast, in their initial knee-jerk reaction, which I'll allude to later, kind of forgot. And this is why Force of Will is continued to be reprinted in this day and age, because this was originally reprinted also as an uncommon, hence why it gets all the much-deserved reprints. It's simply the best counterspell in the history of the game. But counterspell is a very close second. No more cards were to be added or removed from the list going forward. Once again, Force of Will, uncommon rarity in Ice Age Alliances when it was printed. Magic, back in the day, was the Wild West, and I will always maintain it, because like this was printed at uncommon. Today this will be a mythic rare, and I think it is printed as like a rare whenever it is reprinted. And then the last change was Wizards removed the loophole that allowed them to reprint reserve list cards in non-English languages. See, when the game started spreading around the world, Wizards kind of knew they had to get some of the original cards into the hands of some of the other players that were playing in Europe and Germany and Italy and, South America even. They had to reprint these cards. So they would reprint much later, mind you, versions of the cards. So they had to close that loophole up because people were starting to catch on with the rise of the internet. And I can pick up a OG Dual Land in Russian for a fraction of the cost. Sign me up. And this was all good until 2010. When something extremely bizarre happens. Dual decks, Phyrexia versus the Coalition, and From the Vault relics are released. These two products contained reserved list reprints, but in foil. Dual decks were a product that Wizards of the Coast used to make, which contained two pre-constructed theme decks. This one was about Phyrexians battling against the Coalition and contained one reserved list card, Phyrexian Negator. First seen in Urza's Destiny, which was released in 1999. This card is a 5/5 for 2 generic and 1 black mana. It has trample, and whenever Negator is dealt damage, you sacrifice that many permanents. This card would be reprinted today at maybe as a rare in today's Magic, but because of the reserve list, can never be reprinted again. Besides, Phyrexian Obliterator is a better card. Almost same stat lines, but whenever it deals damage, target opponent, whoever dealt the damage has to sacrifice that many. Then From the Vault Relics was another product that was From the Vault Relics drops. And the From the Vault sets were another product that Wizards of the Coast used to make and was a cool way of getting reprints in the hands of collectors. They had different themes for each of the From the Vault sets, like From the Vault Dragons, From the Vault Legends, From the Vault Angels. Wizards of the Coast made 10 Vault products in total from 2008 to 2017. And the theme from this Vault that we're talking about was Artifacts. This product reprinted 15 artifact cards and this time had 4 reserve list cards. Karn's Silver Golem, Mox Diamond, Memory Jar, and Masticore. Karn, Silver Golem, 5 colorless mana for a legendary artifact creature Golem for a 4/4, 4 power, 4 toughness. When Karn, Silver Golem blocks or becomes blocked, it gets -4/+4 until end of turn. And then for 1 generic mana, its activated ability, target non-creature artifact becomes an artifact creature with power and toughness equal to the converted mana cost until end of turn. Mox Diamond, a zero-cost artifact. If Mox Diamond would enter the battlefield, you may discard a land card instead. If you do, put Mox Diamond onto the battlefield. If you don't, put it into its owner's graveyard. And then you can tap it to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Memory Jar. 5 generic mana for an artifact. Tap it, sacrifice Memory Jar. Each player exiles all cards from his or her hand face down and draws 7 cards. At the beginning of the next end step, each player discards his or her hand and returns to his or her hand each card he or she exiled this way. Masticore. 4 generic mana for an artifact creature, Masticore, with 4 power, 4 toughness. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice Manticore unless you discard a card. For 2 generic mana, activated ability deals 1 damage to target creature. And then for 2 generic mana, as an activated ability, you can regenerate Masticore. How was Wizards able to pass the reserve list this time? Well, see, when the reserve list was created, foil cards didn't exist yet. They were still a few years away with the release of Urza's Legacy in 1999. Reserved list cards, but in foil, could now be able to be reprinted. That was the hope, and some in Wizards of the Coast knew that loophole could be used to finally get away from the albatross that has been the reserve list. And the hope amongst players were that maybe we could get a very slow trickle of reprints into the hands of players. I'm not talking Power 9 stuff, and I'm not even talking OG dual lands, but stuff like Fastbond, Vesuvian Doppelganger, and even Narwhal, among other cards that do not deserve to be on this list. Remember, I'm not talking about the Moxes, the dual lands, the Wheel of Fortunes, or whatnot. Just fun cards like the Depletion lands from Ice Age, and one of my favorite cards from all of the earliest days of me playing Magic, Lake of the Dead. I love this card. It's dope. It is the perfect black land thematically for Magic the Gathering. Power at any cost. I want that mana. I'm going to sacrifice a swamp to do so. I love that card. I played 2 of them in my Dimir discard bounce back deck. What happened? Nobody really knows. But what I think is the curse of the reserve list finally biting Wizards of the Coast in the butt again, as Hasbro, which bought Wizards of the Coast in 1999 and has gone on to be one of the low-key, weirdest, lucky purchases from a corporation ever, considering that Wizards of the Coast is basically floating Hasbro at this point. Hasbro's legal team more than likely got involved and said something to the effect of, remember when you created that reserve list and you said you're never reprinting these 572 cards or exact versions under a different name ever again? Yeah, that's kind of like legally binding, and you're risking us getting sued over it because of a little concept called promissory estoppel. The basic idea of promissory estoppel, and yes, I had to actually figure out how to say estoppel, is when when Wizards of the Coast said we will never reprint these cards again, this can be enforced like a contract because it is a business, it's a corporation saying it. And this can be enforced like a contract under certain circumstances. And this reserve list issue would possibly be fought by collectors who then can argue that because Wizards of the Coast made this promise that they're never reprinting cards again, that the cards are now flooding the market and they changed their buying patterns and they now have lost money because everything is flooding the market. So the players who got mad for the forced creation of the reserve list 15 years prior messed it up for everyone forever. Forever. Because now legally Wizards of the Coast cannot reprint anything on the reserve list or even create an identical reprint of reserve list cards that do the exact same thing for the exact same mana cost and the exact same keywords, or lands that come into play untapped that tap for 1 or 2 different colors that are also considered 2 different lands as well under a different name. Thanks, knee-jerk reaction in 1995. Now, once again, before the angry comments come at me, and yes, they will, remember, I'm not talking about reprints of dual lands. I'm not talking about reprints of Moxes. I'm not talking about reprints of even Power 9 stuff. Does Lake of the Dead deserve to be a reserve list land? It would only see play in Commander. I don't want to pay $70. That's just me. But once again, there's many cards from the history of Magic the Gathering, early days, that can never be reprinted again, that are harmless. Think about that. The card that we showed before, the 2/2 with Flying First Strike for 1 generic and 2 white mana. No card like that can exist again. The depletion lands from Ice Age can never exist again. Those were fun. Those were their first attempts at getting around the dual lands. They finally figured it out with the pain lands. The tap to add a colorless, or if you add one of the 2 colors, it can make it deals 1 damage to you. And they've been reprinted ad nauseum. Good reference. To this day. And I know what you're saying. Well, what about 30th anniversary? How did they sidestep those issues when creating the 30th anniversary set? We already covered it with the collectors and the World Championship decks, because they have different backs and there are different gold foil, I think. I don't know. I barely watched anybody open up that atrocity of a product. So along with using the much different reprinting approach, those who have opened these packs, they say the cards themselves feel very different from a normal Magic the Gathering card, even though the same process has been done with the sleeve in the middle and whatnot, like the piece of paper, the blue piece of paper in the middle, but the card stock itself feels kind of below par. And they feel almost flimsy and cheap as well, they've said. And they also cost $250 per pack when it first came out. And you can only buy these in a package of 4, making this a $1,000 investment for proxies made by Wizards of the Coast, because they can't reprint any of the cards. In closing, what do I feel about the reserve list? There are quite a few cards that I feel need to come off. My opinion has always been, up until I started doing research on this, was the reserve list is an abomination. It should never exist. This, that, and the other thing. But now doing my research, I can see both sides. I still feel when it happened, because I was kind of in the pit when it happened, in the middle of it all when it happened. To me, it always felt like a bunch of the older neckbeards getting super angry for no reason. Today, I can see why, with the market flooding, but also, especially when you coupled with the fact that 4th edition came out, then Chronicles came out, and 4th edition was a lot of Arabian Nights Dark Legends reprints in there as well. So they reprinted, double dipped twice almost. I can see why collector bases were mad. I can see why Wizards of the Coast did what they stupidly did, not thinking through. Remember, this company has a history of not thinking through things. There's a reason why Arena is a really good program, but they held on to MTGO for as long as they did, because they refused to get help. They always thought they could do it themselves and better, even though at the time Microsoft was literally down the street from them. They could have had massive amounts of help, and they chose not to do it. And they've chosen never to do it. Remember, their online video presence, yes, Chandelar's getting a lot of love, and it deserves it. And the fan remake with Forge and whatnot, which I've been dipping into a little bit. Those are amazing. That's what a Magic the Gathering video game single player should be. And they've stupidly refused to even follow this advice. And that's not just for me, it's from everybody else. So you have that approach. But I also have the approach of, there's a lot of cards on the reserve list that don't deserve to be on the reserve list. Cards that just don't make any sense to me, that I think they should be reprinted. Depletion Lands being one of them. Lake of the Dead being another one. Yes, that's probably the most powerful card that I've just mentioned on the reserve list that isn't a Power 9 or OG Dual Land. But what can you do? But at the end of the day, the reserve list now, in my opinion, because this podcast, doing the research for this, has changed my opinion. The reserve list needs to exist, but I don't think all 572 cards need to be on there. And that is it for this heavily researched, I might add. Yes, there's only 4 sources, but those 4 sources had a lot of research done on them. A lot of the articles were amazing. I mean, the TCG Player One alone accounted for a lot of it because it did go into in-depth detail about, what was going on at that time in the player base. The MTG fandom, shout out to them. They have the numbers, man, of how many cards were printed. So that let me do the math, how the maths on these sets. Magic.wizards.com, that was for Marrow's article that he wrote in 2013. I didn't even use their official statements on that. MTG Goldfish also had a great article about Chronicles and the creation of the reserve list and whatnot. I didn't, once again, this is a time period that not many things were captured by Wizards of the Coast or even kept. Because it's been so long, it was so long ago, it was so early in the lifespan of the company. We're talking like the company was 2 years old when this all went down. Magic had only just come out in 93, and now 95, you have some major things going on. So it was fun doing this type of research. Let me know if you like these type of videos. Because most of the time, except for the Friday the 13th lawsuit one, I kind of have some scribbled ideas, and I float blind. Now, the amount of research has taken me a while. It was only those 4 articles, but remember, I kind of had a script for this one. So, thank you to Max Heroes and Villains. Thank you for listening out there and hopefully liking and subscribing. This podcast comes out every Wednesday. I try to, and I have a couple more ideas that are floating in this brain of mine involving TCG Card Shop Simulator and possibly MTG Forge. My name is Dom Douglas, and may your top deck always be mythic. Half of the cards in the reserve list don't deserve to be on the reserve list.